This is Eating Crow with Pete Durand.
Let's do it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Eating Crow podcast. I have the pleasure of being joined by Tucker Shade, which, by the way, is the coolest name I've had in a podcast so far. You could do just about any profession with that name.
Thank you. I didn't have much to do with it, but I'm happy it turned out that way.
I got a funny story about naming one of my kids later we'll get into. But Tucker, welcome. It's just great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So full disclosure, I met Tucker through, I think we ran into each other in the past through some other connections, but my son now works in Tucker's organization. So I've had some interest in learning more about Tucker and his background, and we'll drill into that as well. But Tucker, kind of describe what you do at Savills and tell us how the heck has COVID impacted commercial real estate? And I want to drill into how you got there.
Sure. COVID's had an impact on a lot of organizations, but I work in the office space arena and office space brokerage. And as everybody that is maybe listening to this at some point, probably from home instead of the office, can attest it. COVID is having a very significant impact, short term and likely long term, on the office business or the office brokerage sector. But I am a commercial real estate broker, as most people would refer to it, and I and our team here in Raleigh and throughout the United States spend 100% of our time representing tenants or the users of primarily office space and helping them identify, negotiate, and secure office leases or the purchase of office buildings or portions of.
And I think one of your unique angles, if I understand correctly, is you guys help people with multiple locations, potentially globally, which is a unique position for Savills to do this. You're a global organization.
That's right. And, our company has offices, about 350 offices around the world. We've got about 32,000 employees around the world. So our perspective and our involvement in real estate goes beyond the local approach. And, we're fortunate enough to have a handful of clients that have hired us or engaged us to help them both locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. So as we talk about COVID, as we talk about office leasing in general, we do have a fairly broad set of properties and countries to speak to.
So the ability to manage a large portfolio is one of the key advantages of Savills. It
is. For businesses that do have offices all over the world, they could go out and engage brokers in each one of those local markets to help them. Mm-hmm. But it is oftentimes easier and more effective to hire one firm that has offices where they have offices so that there's some continuity.
Yep.
As they approach their real estate, and it helps with kind of creating a centralized approach to a distributed set of offices.
So from what you're hearing from your clientele, are you seeing different reactions globally versus what's going on here in the United States?
That is a good question. Honestly, Pete, it seems like it is a little bit more uniform than you would expect. You
really?
Would expect that, from obviously internationally, there are cultural implications that play a part in real estate and how companies acquire, keep, staff, how they use real estate, and what role that office plays within the organization. But from what we have seen, and I think we're still in probably maybe in the third inning of this thing,
right?
But the reaction that we're seeing kind of across the globe in this stage in the game is rooted heavily in kind of safety and health, and
sure.
Companies making sure that they're taking care of their employees first and allowing them the flexibility to remain at home in the near term. But as we start to work with organizations that have developed and are rolling out policies, kind of a getting back to work policy, we are seeing a little uniformity in how they approach whether or not they're going to keep an office open,
sure.
How they're going to restaff that office, what if anything are they going to do to the physical property in getting back into the office. And so a lot of that, and again, our our exposure to that, is working with, primarily some United States based companies. And so they are deploying kind of I want to almost call it kind of a top down approach and a rollout, if you will, on how they get back into the office worldwide. So I don't want to say they're imposing a US centric rollout around the world, but there is some uniformity to it. Surprising.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that that depending on where the headquarters were, could have a bigger influence on what's happening in the rest of their global operations.
It is, and it's interesting to me. If you have a company that let's say they have decided to create a call center over in Mumbai or Bangalore, or Hyderabad, or one of these areas, it's very surprising to me, or encouraging, I guess you could say, that those individuals are able to actually go back to their homes and conduct business, just like they would as if they were in the office, right?
Sure.
I would think access, in certain places, we have clients that have offices in, say Kathmandu, Nepal, right? In Kathmandu, Nepal, the electrical grid is unreliable, right? There are power outages all the time. And so, those folks may not have access to internet at home, but they're figuring out ways to stay productive. But, we are seeing, companies that have, offices in second world, third world countries like that, really try to bring their people back, maybe a little bit sooner, just because they can't perform their function at home.
What's the latest view from an organization like Savills on the U.S. shifting people back into offices? Do you see it getting back to 50%, 70% occupancy, or staying where we are for a few more months?
Well, so short-term and long-term view,
right?
I think that the short-term view on bringing people back into the office, and I don't know if I could speak for Savills as a whole here, but my experiences are the majority of folks are starting to push people back into the office later this year, with kind of a line in the sand date out there of June of 2021. You've seen some of these large organizations like Facebook or Google or some of the other large organizations put that date further out in time. But those large organizations, they have the benefit and the resources to manage their people remotely much differently and much more effectively than your small, medium, organizations. And, quite frankly, their culture is already defined in large part, right? The innovation that they have to roll out, there are processes in place with that. It's a very different situation for those companies that are just getting going. Where they don't have a defined culture, where they need to, we're working with a group right now that has 20 people in town now, and by June of next year, they plan on having 50, right?
Sure.
How do you get from 20 to 50 people while everybody is working remotely? How do you hire over Zoom and then try to bring people up? So I think there is going to be a couple different paths based on the life cycle of the company and when they come back into the office, because the office plays a very different role in, new companies versus established companies.
We're going through that right now. We've onboarded a couple of people the past few weeks, and it's, we had a team meet them in the office and do some physical onboarding. And then the rest of it, they're meeting the team through these kind of calls.
Yeah.
So the training's different. The culture's different. What kind of conversations do you have with customers about what the office will look like once they come back? How different will it be?
So physically different, I think it depends on where those companies are in their lease, in the stage of their lease, right? And what appetite does a company have to spend money to retrofit their office, not knowing how long whatever that capital investment is going to be worthwhile or utilized, right?
Sure.
There are a lot of companies, and this is a conversation that we get involved in right now. There is a pre-vaccine and a post-vaccine view of the office space. And so in a post-vaccine, assuming that the vaccine is effective, there are a lot of companies that are hesitant to spend any money on retrofitting their space because it may be money wasted down 6-12 months from now. So what are they doing to account for that in the near term for those folks that are coming back? They are staggering occupancy. So you hear this 25, 50, 75%, occupancy staggering. That is due in large part to trying to spatially or socially distance their people that do come into the office.
Understood.
Like when you go into a restaurant these days, you'll see chairs at some tables and no chairs at others.
Yep.
They pull the chair away from the desk, right? Every other desk or something like that. So, I think the pre and post-vaccine storyline has, that's what people are focused on.
It'll be interesting, and obviously it's different, as you mentioned, when you think about organizations like Facebook or Google or Amazon. They're moving information. They can do that from a computer in a Zoom call all day long. They don't have physical assets that they need to manage or be a part of.
Yeah.
So they'll have different things to consider versus an organization that has half manufacturing, half office space. They've got all those challenges. But I'm even wondering, when you think about coming back, regardless of a vaccine or not, this has to have people thinking differently about how to drive productivity through an organization in a what I would call a blended working environment where people can work from home infrequently and then maybe potentially work from the office. I know at our organization, we need to rethink the way the whole process works because we find value when we come together as a team, in a group, in a meeting to collaborate, right? That's really important, is that collaboration piece, looking someone in the eye and reading the room and finding out who I'm losing and who I'm not losing, and then saying, can you draw that on the whiteboard for me? We miss that interaction. I don't know that we need to be at our desks to do that, right? I think getting those spurts of creativity as a team and then potentially saying, you guys go off and work remote for a while and get some stuff done, and then we'll come back in and collaborate. So I'm wondering how many people are looking at you guys and saying, hey, Savills, you're doing this all over the world. What can we do to take this opportunity to pivot or rethink the office? And how much work do you guys do, or are you influenced by architectural firms that are out there rethinking this whole process as well?
Yeah, it's a huge part of the conversation right now, and the way that is trending at this point in time. And this is actually happening a little bit when prior to COVID. Is you have two types of space. You have two kind of categories of space within an office. You've got me space and we space. You have space in which I sit down at the desk. It's a designated space just for me. And that's where I do my work. And then I've got we space, which is collaborative space, just like what you're talking about, getting together around a whiteboard, et cetera. So what we see happening right now is there is going to be a further reduction in me space and a growth in we space. So you're going to be kind of pulling at it from two different sides. So there will be, less dedicated office space per employee, but equal to or greater amount of collaborative space to allow people to get together and work on groupthink or innovation or project management and that type of thing, morale boosting activities, things like that. So it's we're going through a pretty big shift right now, but I think in addition to the me space, we space paradigm, there's the real discussion going on right now is what is the impact of work from home going to be on the future size of the office?
Absolutely. So you're mentioning this me space, we space thing. And by the way, I like that term. I'm not sure if that's your term or how people view that, but it's an interesting way to think about it. I was over at PMC Carolina, Harry Chalker's company, who I think actually kind of connected you and my son at one point. Harry, have you seen Harry's new space yet?
Just online. We've been invited to go over there. We just haven't done it yet.
So get over there. I took a tour of it. I think it was on Friday morning. It's astounding.
I've heard that. Yeah.
I want to go work there. I don't care what I do. I said, I'll sit in the lobby and, welcome people as a Walmart greeter. But you had a couple of things that struck me when I saw that space. And by the way, a little background here, somebody will have a podcast here soon. But Harry's one of Hayworth, who's a global commercial furniture manufacturer. He's one of their largest dealers in the Southeast. And a really progressive thinker. Harry assembles, I think, components from various different vendors and manufacturers into these amazing workspaces. So they were in the process of building out their own space in the middle of when COVID hit. So they've got architectural plans, they've got layouts, they've got furniture, they've got walls, floors, and they literally had to hit the pause button and say, how do we rethink this? To their credit, they did a great job rethinking it. So they have these, you call these, and Hayworth had a campaign called Social Spaces, which at one time probably had the most awkward, connotation during COVID. But they've created these environments where you I said, Harry, when I walked in, I felt like I was walking into a 5-star hotel. The way they've got music in the background is very different than I've ever seen. It's piped throughout the office in a way you can still function and communicate. And they have these pods where you can sit down and do a workstation and do what you need to accomplish, but a lot more of these collaborative centers that are adequately spaced, both indoors and outdoors, where I could think of tremendous creativity. You get people in an environment where now they're thinking about, because you know this, if you want to be there, your productivity goes up.
Right.
If you don't want to be there, it just doesn't, because you're thinking the whole time about leaving.
Right.
So I also, you made an interesting comment. I see this interesting combination of carrying that feeling into someone's home. So I said, Harry, if I come to work here and then I go home and my home office is worse,
right,
and you want me to stay there, we got to figure out how to tie those two together and make it feel like they're connected.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I mean, the division between the home office and the office is getting blurred very, very quickly, right?
It is.
We've been forced kind of through the black hole here into everybody can now work from home, which doesn't mean that their home is set up for their workspace, right?
No.
So a lot of people have to adapt, but we're 5 months into this, and I would imagine there's still a lot of people sitting at their kitchen table, on their laptop.
Correct.
Right? And now they've got 2 monitors sitting on their kitchen table that they take on and off there, 2 times a day, right? So it's not. There is going to be. I was talking to the leading residential real estate agent in the Triangle area last week, and he said it is amazing how quickly people are looking to sell their house and purchase a house that is larger than what they have, because now their house has to be. It's more, what do you say? It's more than just a shelter, right? It's their gym. It's their home office. They some folks are building out rooms for their kids to do homeschooling, right? Or virtual learning and that type of thing. So I mean, we're definitely in a very big shift, but as far as the work from home element and its impact on commercial real estate, I had a call this morning with a large telecom company, and they're sitting there trying to figure out how to resize, how to resize their headquarters office, right? And the conversation that I was kind of taking them through is, you got to understand that work from home is what it has always been. It's an employee benefit.
Yep.
Some companies offer it. Some companies have offered it. What's going to happen is that employee benefit is going to expand, right? It is going to be more, it's going to be offered more. People are going to have more flexibility. But working from home in and of itself has zero impact on an office's square footage. Zero.
Interesting.
Right? The only way that you impact an office's square footage is if you move away from what has historically been a 1 desk to 1 employee ratio. 1 desk versus 1 employee ratio. So this whole hoteling, flexible office, these kind of terms that are being thrown around, people and companies have to understand, if they want to reduce their office space, which is the economic advantage of working from home, they have to move away from dedicated desks, right? So that's how you do it. Because historically, what we've done in the brokerage business is a company comes along and they say, I have 100 employees, and we say, what sector are you in? And they say technology, and we say, well, in technology in Austin, Texas, you need to be leasing about 175 square feet per person. So we are going to go lease 17,500 square feet, 100 times 175, right? Well, that's because there was a direct correlation between the number of employees and square footage per employee. Now the conversation that we're taking people through is, you need to figure out what roles and what individuals require a dedicated desk. And that could be driven by a number of things: the CEO, VP of HR, the guy the IT support guy or girl that needs to be there all the time, right? There are roles and responsibilities that require a dedicated desk. There are people that, for their own personal circumstances, will be more productive with a dedicated desk.
Certainly.
There's folks that live outside of town that don't have great access to internet. There are some folks that have 4 kids and 4 dogs at home. Right? That's not a great place to work, right? So what you need to do, or what we're taking people through, is to break apart your population, your office population, into those that need dedicated spaces and then those that do not, right? And then for those that do not, you need to have a candid conversation with those department managers or maybe it's a top down exercise where you say, how many days per week do the remainder of the sales department need to be in the office?
Sure.
Is it 3 out of 5? Is it 2 out of 5? And then that if it's 3 out of 5, that means you need 60% of the 60% of the people need to come in, right? So then you take the dedicated offices, you add this ratio together, and that helps you form how many seats you need for your future office sizing.
Right.
You take onto that, Pete, and then you add this we space.
Yep.
And then that is helping people create a framework for right sizing or resizing the office in the future. But in this exercise, what we're running into is their companies are hesitant or not putting a lot of weight into having a space large enough to accommodate the entire company. So the question is, the day of the town hall meeting, right? Which companies have had for forever, where the CEO or whomever gets up and kind of does the rah-rah, are those days over?
Right.
Or is the town hall meeting going to occur off-site from here going forward?
It's interesting. We have a town hall format in our office. We call it the stadium.
Yeah.
Where every Monday we got the whole company together at 9:15, and the remote office is zoomed in.
Yeah.
But you still got 100 people in a room. Yeah. And people are thinking differently about that right now. And maybe when we get into a vaccine or no vaccine environment where a year from now, Americans have a pretty short memory, right? So we'll break through this and somehow we'll all be hugging it out and high-fiving each other and, sharing beers in a year. I don't know.
That's right.
But yeah, I think the same thing. I even believe my team could benefit from a we space somewhere in Durham or in Raleigh where we'd say, we're going to go down and have a 4-hour team meeting, collaborate the heck out of it, and then we're going to go have a drink at the pub down the street together as a team and make it a bonding environment. To me, there's some benefit to doing that and getting away and then being able to focus on my work. To your point, companies have to have a discussion about where do people accomplish their work in the best environment. For some, it is at home. For some, it's at the office. And some, it's in a we space. And they're going to have to be very, very flexible as they look at this, which makes your job, thinking about all of the commercial real estate in a particular market, how do you reallocate it and repurpose it so that it's effective?
Yep. And I'll give you a case in point. Some of this has more to do with, call it the social distancing impact of COVID, but we had a client that was looking to lease 200,000 square feet in Berlin, Germany. Okay. They were identified a building. They were moving forward. It was in the CBD of Berlin, and COVID happens, and Berlin has a high degree of public transportation, right?
Very much so.
Probably get on the subway in order to get to the office. Well, that caused a lot of concern. So they broke that same requirement up into 4 50,000 square foot offices and put them closest to the population centers outside of Berlin.
Interesting.
To avoid that amount of public transportation, and also to make sure that, if there is some sort of hotspot effect that hits in one location, it doesn't affect all of the population. So, now if you really think about that, Pete, okay, so that has a 10-year tail on it.
Yeah, it does.
10-year lease. So I think that the smart decision right now is no decision in the world of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody would argue with that, because we just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But
right.
that organization made a 10-year decision to bifurcate their operations. So if innovation is driven by bumping into people that you wouldn't otherwise, right, and cross-pollination of ideas throughout different departments, what is the long-term impact of bifurcating an operation like that? We just don't know. Right. And how much of that is replicable through Zoom? I would tend to think there's got to be some dilution to that.
It is. And by the way, leave it to the Germans to factor in transportation protocols and commuting times and the different methods of public transportation in Berlin into their decision-making process.
Right. Very quickly too.
By the way, Berlin's one of my favorite cities. I love it there. And public transportation, for those that haven't spent a lot of time, all their taxi cabs are Mercedes-Benz with TVs in them.
Yeah.
And they were watching TV, live TV in Mercedes-Benz way before we were. So it's a great city. But let's shift gears for a minute, Tucker. And I think I've enjoyed hearing Vinny talk about what he's learning from you about the space and the adaptation you guys have had to made. He talked a lot about when he joined commercial real estate. Do I go on the development side? Do I go on, the tenant rep side, the transactional side? There's all different places. He did his homework. He talked to a lot of people.
Yep.
I think he chose wisely because, on the tenant rep side, you're always part of whatever movement's happening. Expansion, contraction, changes, subleases, whatever it is. There's always going to be a transaction. Right. And your job is to help your customers find the right space at the right time. Let's shift gears and talk about, your background. You've spent your career in commercial real estate. You had another sales job prior to this, but before that, you were a very successful Division I athlete at the light blue school down the street. My son went to NC State, so
that's right.
Wherever I write a check to, Tucker, that's where my loyalties lie. But you swam at UNC. You were a All-American, 4-time All-American, I believe.
That's right.
Yep. And team captain, correct? At a pretty impressive swimming school. So when you were going through the process as an athlete, did you know what you wanted to get into while you were there? What drove you to get into a sales or eventually into commercial real estate? What was it that triggered that for you?
Yeah, interesting. So when I was at school, through the beginning of my junior year, I was a chemistry major of all things.
No kidding.
I was interested in the sciences. Some of that had to do with a very influential science teacher that I had back in, small town Illinois, before I was lucky enough to go out and come to UNC. But, throughout school, I quickly figured out that I think my talents lied more with interacting with people and communication with people. And coming out of school, I actually packed up from UNC and went over to move to San Francisco. This was 1999 through the .com era.
Sure, the very end of the .com era.
I signed up with a company, whatever it was, 21, that was publicly traded and IPO'd, and I got some stock options as part of my signing bonus or whatever it was, which I certainly didn't deserve as a first-time job. And as I was driving from North Carolina out to San Francisco, the stock price went from like 57 to 7. Right?
Oh no!
Yeah. By the time I showed up, I had a very quick education in what the value or the D-value of stock options can be. So
we've all had that, yeah.
I actually cut my teeth in a sales role out in San Francisco during the reemergence or coming out of the dot bomb at that point in time, which was fascinating because that is about the highest, in my experience, about as high paced as you can get.
Yeah.
I joined an organization that had an inside sales department, which I know you're very familiar with. An inside sales department. I came on at a class of 10. Right. And, in 4 or 5 weeks, that was from 10 down to 3. Right. And, I went, worked with 2 companies while out there and, watched kind of the bust and boom cycle and, identified, getting back to your question, kind of identified in myself that the discipline that swimming gave me and that athletics gave me was an attribute in the business world.
Right.
Because really, swimming is about as boring a sport as you can get out there. But if you do put the reps in and you stick to it, the results will come your way. So just like kind of getting in the pool for doubles at 5:15, 5:30 in the morning growing up, I would often be the first one in the office out in San Francisco to start making calls and start, kind of putting checks on the board,
Sure.
It's swimming is one of those sports that either you're going to learn discipline through swimming, and if you stick with it in the business world, it certainly pays dividends.
It does, and as a triathlete, swimming is probably the weakest part of my disciplines. I've swam next to you a couple times at TAC, and I'm amazed when the high school kids are in swim season, they're in the water, 12 in a lane, grinding it out at 5 in the morning. It is not for the faint of heart. And I think what you're describing is the grind, right? When you interview someone who has spent time as a Division I athlete or any kind of an athlete in college. When Vinny was first transferring to state, he met up with some of the soccer players and saw them at a bar and ended up having a conversation, didn't know them. And he asked, what's it been like for you? And one of them was actually a chemistry major.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, he said, look, I can tell you just a very short story, Vin. I've interviewed for several jobs. I interviewed against one of my classmates in chemical engineering for a job. That person was smarter than me. But I got the job because the hiring manager looked at me and said, I'm going to hire you because I know at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get up with your game face on and be ready to roll. I don't need to teach you discipline. I don't need to teach you the importance of hard work, teamwork. All those things come with someone who's participated at that level. And you instantly have a qualification piece that doesn't need to be explored. Right. Now, describe to me, I think in your hiring practice, you tend to focus on hiring people that are like-minded, former college athletes. How's that worked out for you? Has your thesis held up during the time you've built your own company?
Yeah, I'd say, we have some folks in our organization here that do come from a sports background and some that don't, and both kind of profiles bring a different attributes to the business, and our business is pretty multifaceted endeavor in which you need to be able to interact with people. You need to be able to do some light math, but you need to be able to understand finance and work through some problem solving financially, right? But there is one attribute of the business that definitely caters better to those folks that have an athletic background, and it is the business development element.
Sure. Right?
The business development element, and I others have heard me say this before. I mean, commercial real estate's a three-legged stool, right? And if you don't work on one of those legs, you're going to fall over.
Correct.
Right? So business development is one, and then second is transaction management, helping those clients that you've been fortunate enough to get hired by, and then the third one is professional development, making sure that tomorrow you learn something tomorrow that you didn't know yesterday, right? So the BD side, the business development side, does cater better to those folks that have athletic backgrounds for just the reasons that you stated, which is, they realize that, it's not just going to come to them. They're going to have to go out there and they're going to have to put the reps in, and those reps turn into, we've got a guy that works for us that, has a background in college football, played football all growing up. And he will sit down at the desk and basically get out the yellow pages, for those who remember what that is.
Yes.
Get out the yellow pages, and he will make the calls doggedly day after day. And, he's brought business into the firm that we wouldn't have otherwise. And, he's engaging with businesses that, have requirements that typically would be picked up by people that have 10, 15, 20 years experience in commercial real estate, and he has 3 or 4.
Fantastic.
Right? So yeah, it's there is, I don't see that trend going away. That is an attribute for hiring managers and people coming out of school that that in my mind is kind of irreplaceable.
And at the end of the day, people buy based on relationships.
Right.
And if you've made an investment in a relationship potentially early in your career, and I believe you have a story like this where you did a deal, a very small deal that most people would pass up. That person that you did the deal for, and you were successful and came through in the clutch, evolved their career to the point where they're not making a decision on a very, very much bigger deal, right, and you're the person they're going to call.
Right.
So that investment in building those relationships, we can do all this virtual thing, but at the end of the day, people want to do business with people they like. This makes it more challenging. I think also Vinny has described me, and I think it's probably true in any company. I think the Zoom thing has made it more difficult to mentor young employees than if they're in, like you said, in an office next to you. Hey, Mark, hey, Matt, come on in here. I want to walk you through this deal. You're not going to do that when you're at your desk in a virtual environment. So, how do you address that? How do you bridge that gap in mentoring your young team?
Well, let me kind of tack onto that on the front end. This is happening at about the worst possible time that it could. We have the largest segment of the working population of baby boomers exiting the workforce at the same time that this Zoom impact is happening and forcing people, that that knowledge transfer that is probably more important now than it ever has been is being hampered by, this work from home effect, right? So it's a little scary, right? But, to your point, businesses don't have textbooks, right?
Sure.
You may get a 3-ring binder and a manual when you start, and that'll teach you something, but you learn most of the things through interacting with your peers,
right?
That have been likely for much longer than you have, right?
Right. Well, you said something that I haven't, by the way, I haven't heard people make that statement before, right? Which is the winding down of the baby boomer generation and the knowledge transfer that needs to take place that's being hampered by the fact that we're doing this. I have a very talented employee. I'm sad to see leave the business, but got a really great opportunity. Very happy for them. And we're now trying to figure out, all right, we got to get all what's in your head over to this person's head. It's a much more deliberate act than it used to be.
Yeah.
Right? We have to document things in a way we didn't do that we could do in a whiteboard in front of somebody and make sure that knowledge transfer is a bit more formal.
Well, and play this out a little bit longer. Why do people end up staying with the companies that they're at, right? Which is where you really get an ROI on an employee the longer that they're there, hopefully.
Yep.
It's because they like and they respect and they trust the people that they work with, right?
Sure.
And they interact with them and they become friendly with them, right?
Right.
So what happens if people are spending a lot less time together? They're spending a lot less time around, interacting with the core of the organization. They're going to feel naturally, I think they're going to feel a lot less loyal to the organization. So, we've got this, there could be this kind of growing, layer on top of that this is going to play into the millennial generation, which is the second largest working population that we've ever seen come through.
Yeah.
Right? Which is already, arguably a little bit more jumpy than the generations that have come before in terms of, sticking with a certain company. So, I think we've got, a couple real headwinds in front of us here in terms of, legacy knowledge transfer within organizations, which the timing of the COVID thing is really going to exacerbate that.
What'll be interesting is to see how you guys can weave that into your value proposition when you're helping people find and think about new real estate and new office space. That's a level of depth that once you get in front of a potential client, you can deliver that kind of, it's the same thing we feel like at our company. If I have a conversation with you, I'll be able to help you understand what we're going to bring to the table. You've given me a couple of points that I hadn't even considered. The fact that you can sit down with an employer and say, here's why you need to rethink your office space, because all of your tribal knowledge is about to leave your business. And the people you need to replenish that with, to your point, are going to be jumpy, right? It's easy for a recruiter to pop in and go, hey, I got more money and a better virtual office monitor because I have no relationship with my peers. I haven't interacted with them. I haven't formed these bonds that are so important by the way, I think this generation craves it. I think they crave those personal relationships even after work, right? I want to go have some, a drink with my coworkers and build those relationships. We don't have kids yet. That's my social circle very often for people is their first employees, right? Yeah. So, I think it's going to be interesting as you said. I think a lot of companies are still in the best thing to do right now is nothing. Let's evaluate. But they got to start thinking about those issues as they move forward. And they got to get people who come back to the office to feel like, number one, they're safe. Number two, they created a place where they want to be, right? One of the things that amazed me about Harry's space is they wove glass partitions in to the structure in a way that didn't feel confining at all.
Right.
Versus, somebody in the back room with a table saw chopping up pieces and bolting them to the desks, right? That doesn't feel
right.
It doesn't feel like a place I want to be.
Right. I think you're right on it. And it's interesting when this whole thing happened. I was talking to a client of ours, an engineering firm. $3 billion a year. They got offices all over the world, and this guy runs the Raleigh office, and he was saying, I had a junior guy call me and say that another engineering firm called him and said, hey, if you come and work in our office, you won't even need to go into the office. And so he pitched the work from home. This competitor pitched the work from home as a benefit, a fringe benefit. And the engineer and this junior person told the local Raleigh manager, I want to come into the office.
Yeah.
there may be a complete flip here in which those offices those businesses that maintain office space and allow their people to come together, that may be an attribute. That may be a benefit, right? And think about it. I mean, we're getting married later in life.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
They're forming their social circles are rooted at work in a lot of cases, right? And so taking away the office, I think, I don't think it's going to be as simple as, less office space, the better for everybody.
Vinny's craving getting back in the office, and my wife can't wait till I'm out of here.
Right.
She goes, I need my house back. You need to leave.
Yes. Yeah. We're hearing that a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. So, Tucker, I want to let you get back to the rest of your day. I'm amazed every time I do one of these podcasts how much I learn, and it's great to hear some of the challenges you guys are facing and how you're thinking about them. I'm sure our listeners will benefit and probably take something back to their employers that they hadn't thought of, which will help them understand, hey, we've got to face this and think this differently than we have been. And I'm looking forward to seeing how both your business and the Raleigh market and the global markets kind of rebound from this.
As are we. It's interesting times, and these are the times where you really got to put the effort in.
Yes.
Not just stick your head in the sand, because the relationships that you make as you come through these types of situations will be long lasting. So,
understood. So what's your dog's name, by the way?
She's trying to be part of the podcast, isn't she?
She's great. What's her name?
Her name is Nala. She's a Rhodesian Ridgeback.
Nala. Is that named after the Lion King?
That's exactly right. So Rhodesian Ridgebacks are known as African lion hunting dogs from South Africa. Yeah, they get together a pack of them and they go and trap a lion somewhere. They get to be 100-pound dogs, and
oh wow,
she's participating.
Well, tell Nala we appreciate her input. It was valuable.
Yes, I will. Thanks for the opportunity, Pete.
Yeah, Tucker, I certainly appreciate it, and I look forward to connecting in another podcast down the road.
Sounds good.
Thanks for checking out Eating Crow here on YouTube. Drop a like and subscribe so you never miss a video.